just about ready to get started. I'm going to turn on my video now. Can everyone see me and hear me? Great, welcome. Well, thanks so much for joining us for another webinar. If you've joined in the past and if this is your first time, we're so glad that you can spend some time with us today on this professional development topic. And just a note, I hope everyone is staying safe and adjusting okay to teaching virtually. We're really happy to offer this webinar around the topic of reading skills. The title of today's session is The More You Read, Developing Reading Skills in an Online Environment, and it will be presented by National Geographic Learning's very own Alex Warren. And if you've joined us before, many of you have probably gone to an Alex Warren webinar, but he does have several recordings that are all up on our webinar site. Before I go ahead and hand it over to Alex, I do just want to mention a few technical notes to make sure you have a good webinar experience. So first off, we always recommend you join from a strong connection. I know it's not always possible depending where in the world you are, but it does help with some connectivity issues. Also, if you are joining on a tablet or through the app on your phone, sometimes you have limited functionality there with polling, so we apologize for that. Great. But please know we are recording the whole session and we will be sending that to you after, and we also post that on our webinar archive so you can always view recorded sessions there. I see a lot of questions coming in about certificates. I'll get to that in 1 second. We will send you a certificate after attending this session along with the recordings like I mentioned and the slides in a PDF version. That will get to you in about 3 to 5 business days. If it doesn't get to you past that point, you can always email us at ngl.webinars@cengage.com. And I see a note about not having the names in there. We don't currently have the ability to put everyone's name in. We have over 1,000+ people on each webinar, so we actually rely on you to fill in your own name there. We leave it blank. So we apologize for that, but we hope you understand. Great. Awesome. And so just a few other notes here. We will be making the session interactive. We'll be using the chat box. We have a lot of you on. We have close to, right now, over 800 people. So we'll try to respond to everything. But if we don't miss your question, we will try to answer it at the end too. We'll also be using the polling function as well during the session. So we look forward to your active participation. And just also as a reminder, with so many people on, please try to keep the chat box comments as focused on the session as possible. And just remember to please be respectful to other teachers within the National Geographic Learning community and our presenter today as well, which I know you all will be a great audience. So we're glad you can all be here. All right, and last but not least, we do have a survey at the end, and we'd love to hear your feedback about this session to help us inform future webinars and keep bringing you topics that are useful to your teaching practice. Great. So you'll be sent to that at the end of this session, and we'll also email you a link to that too. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Alex Warren. Alex Warren is a Delta-trained teacher trainer with over 16 years of experience working in ELT as a teacher, academic director, and a teacher trainer. Working for National Geographic Learning, Alex is driven by his passion for developing teachers on a global scale and helping them reach their true potential. A firm believer in the communicative approach to language learning and student-centered learning, Alex enjoys working with innovative and thought-provoking materials and presenting on a wide range of ELT topics. I'm going to go hand it over to Alex now.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much for the lovely introduction there, Emily. And thank you to all of you for joining us today, whether it's early in the morning, in the middle of the day, or at the end of the day. We have people from all over the world. We have people from the Far East, in Japan, Vietnam, China, Hong Kong, and Singapore. We have people from the Middle East, from Oman, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Lebanon, Egypt, Iran, Pakistan. Of course, Europe is well represented from Malta, Ukraine, Russia, France, Greece, Poland, and of course, not forgetting South America as well. Whereas early in the morning, we have people from Colombia, Ecuador, Costa Rica, Mexico, Argentina, Honduras. So thank you ever so much for joining us wherever in the world that you are. And as you are well aware, today's session is all about developing our students' reading skills in this new online world in which we find ourselves. And I say new because, well, we're still only 4, 5, maybe 6 weeks into this new reality of online teaching. And today's session is obviously aimed at helping you to develop specifically your students' reading skills, how to approach reading in the online classroom. So this is the agenda for today. We're first of all going to look at the idea of a synchronous online reading lesson. In other words, what we're doing in a face-to-face, well, in an online virtual classroom with our students. But also we'll look at how we can help them develop their reading skills asynchronously, so outside of that class time with your students. Okay, some of you saying that you can hear me too loudly, some of you saying you can't hear me at all. I'm not quite sure where to pitch it. But what I would say, as Emily said right at the beginning, today's session will be very interactive. I will be getting you to do tasks using the chat box, using polls, and also using Bob, who is the little man at the top of the PowerPoint. Bob's not his real name, it's just a name that I give to him for easy reference, okay? So, just to start us off with some interaction, I just want to see how you guys are doing. I know it's been a really tough few weeks for all teachers when they're trying to adapt to this online classroom reality. So, here's a quick poll for you. How are you feeling about teaching in an online environment? Are you enjoying it? Are you struggling? Or somewhere in between? Alexandra saying, so far so good. Ihor says it's complicated so far. Hi, Mary from Indonesia. Somewhere in between. Some of you saying you can't see the slide. Someone said they prefer teaching online. Well, there we go, you see. Every cloud has a silver lining. You've discovered something new, a skill that you didn't have. Okay, a lot of you are typing in the chat box, which is great, but please try to keep it in the poll, because otherwise things go a little bit crazy in the chat box. I'm going to clear it for now. Okay, so it's going to share those results for you. Bear with me, it just seems to have frozen. Not a good start. Okay, I'm back. So, as you can see, there's the vast majority of you, 58% are somewhere in between, but pleasingly, about 18% more are enjoying it than struggling with the situation. So great, that's good news. And I'm hoping today's session will help more of you feel more comfortable and be able to enjoy it more as well. So yeah, Andrea, sometimes how do we see the poll? Just by clicking on it as you suggest is fine. All right, I'm going to hide that. So let's make a start. And again, this is just a little generic question to get you involved. How do online reading lessons, in your experiences so far, differ from face-to-face reading lessons? So just type some ideas into the chat box and I'll try to keep up with all your suggestions. Okay, they require more time. Yes, that is true, Karina. Much more translating going on. Interesting. It's more difficult to correct pronunciation, or more autonomous, flipped classroom. It's difficult to check if they're actually reading, more time, more effort. Lots of flipped classroom ideas coming through here, which is good, because we're going to explore that more during the session. Difficult to monitor. It's more used on technology. You need to organize your reading and post-reading better. Yes, absolutely, Svetlana, I agree with that. Needs more qualification, less feedback. Difficult to correct. Takes a lot of time and can't check all students. True. More time taking, not too different. Difficult to correct. Okay, good. I mean, you're kind of hitting all the key points, really. I think that the big one there really is this thing about timekeeping. or the amount of time that we have in class for actually doing a reading. And that kind of leads into this idea of the flipped classroom, which a lot of you are mentioning as well. And the two are very much interlinked. However, that said, the actual, in my opinion, the overall actual structure of the reading lesson, regardless of whether we're doing some of it outside of the classroom or some of it inside the classroom, is still essentially the same. And I'll show how that is the case going forwards. But essentially, what we need to consider is this question: to flip or not to flip. So how an online reading lesson very much depends on what we do here. And it very much depends on a number of different factors. But why is it a good idea in the first instance? Well, it's a good idea because it gives you more time. A lot of you saying you don't have enough time for reading, using a flipped classroom gives you more time to focus on specific reading skills. And also to give students time to reflect on their reading and to develop their speaking skills to react to what they have read. Because reading is not only the process of physically reading it, it's also on reflecting on what has been read, sharing viewpoints, sharing opinions. It's all part of the same process. And actually, when we think about it, in the online classroom, our time is even more precious than it was before in the real world classroom. Therefore, we need to make sure that we are maximizing that time as much as we possibly can. So, like I said, there are things that we have to consider when deciding whether we're going to flip or not flip the classroom when it comes to a reading lesson specifically. So, what things do we need to take into account when planning a reading lesson and deciding whether or not to take a flipped learning approach? Again, using the chat box, share some ideas. What do we have to consider? Okay, Daniela says the skill, yes. Scaffolding, age, good. Time, of course, length of lesson might determine how long we can spend on reading or not. Different ability levels, good. Levels, age, interest, vocabulary level, good. Access to technology, what skills we're teaching, age, vocabulary, levels. Okay, perfect. Authentic materials, not authentic. Amazing. You guys know your stuff. Within a number of weeks, you have become experts in reading online or doing online reading lessons. So this is the list that I came up with, which is pretty much everything you've said. Age of students. I mean, clearly, if you've got young learners, doing a flipped classroom approach is probably not going to be appropriate because we cannot expect them to do a reading outside of class and come to class ready prepared. It's just not realistic. Of course, you know your students best. You know what age they might be able to do that. But I would suggest kind of young teenagers might be the earliest we might want to consider that. Secondly, of course, you also said level of the students. If they're lower level students, again, can we really expect them to do a reading at home? Probably not, because they need that online or that support from the teacher to help them through the reading process, but also support from their colleagues in the class as well. Thirdly, the amount of support, or teacher support that's needed, and this links to both of those two things. The more the teacher has to scaffold and provide help for the learners, the less likely or the less feasible it is to do a flipped classroom approach. Fourthly, I think really importantly, what is the focus of the actual lesson? What is the purpose? What are the outcomes of that reading lesson? If it's just general comprehension, then actually that's something that can be done potentially at home. But if it's a specific reading skill, for example, inferring from context, scanning, determining opinion, whatever it might be, we might want to focus more on that in class. Length of text, an obvious one. The longer the text, the longer it's going to take to read. Therefore, you have to consider, is it too long to read in class? The question that comes next is, well, what is too long? It depends on the level of the students, the age of the students, and how well you know your students. Are they going to be able to get through that text in the time that I have? And lastly, how lesson time is best spent. And I kind of alluded to this just now. Lesson time is best spent teaching specific skills and communicating with one another, teacher to students, students to students. So there's lots of things to consider there. And we're going to put that into practice. So I'm going to give you some different scenarios, okay? And I want you to decide whether you think in this scenario it is best to flip the classroom, or, in other words, to do the reading at home before class, or to do it in class. So, here we go. Is it better to read the text in class or for homework? And for this, I will be providing a poll, okay? Please do not type your answers in the chat box. Really important. Do not put it in the chat box. So, this is your first scenario. Have a read and decide whether you think it's better done in class or for homework. And please let me know if that's covering the text. Okay, I'm going to broadcast the results as they're coming through here. So at the moment, 67% are saying it should be done in class. 31% it should be done for homework. Okay, I'm going to end the poll there. Okay, now, in my opinion, and I'm not saying I'm right, I would agree with the majority saying that it should be done in class for a number of reasons. First of all, this is a class of elementary learners, so they're low level. Therefore, they need support from the teacher. Yes, the text is not overly long, as well. It's not too long, so therefore it's not going to take up too much of the lesson actually reading through it. And actually, because of the way it's split up, you could almost do it as a jigsaw read, putting students into groups to read different sections of the text. So it's easily divided up. And also, I think the actual task itself, where they are identifying fact and opinion. So yeah, there's reading for comprehension, but it's also identifying fact and opinion. And I think for that type of task, there needs to be more teacher support. Therefore, combining all of those points, for sure, this should be done in class with your learners. That's not to say that you can't let them read it just by themselves at home beforehand, just to get themselves familiar, but I think it can be done in class. Okay, I'm going to clear that, and I'm going to do a new poll, a new scenario for you. So scenario number 2. Have a read of the scenario, and again, decide if it's best done in class or as homework. Okay, I'm going to make the poll a bit smaller for you. Hopefully that helps. I'm trying to put it in the corner as much as possible. Okay, make sure you read the scenario very carefully. Okay, I'm going to end the poll again. Bear with me a sec. Interestingly, it's kind of gone the other way this time. I'm just going to end the poll. So the vast majority, 80% of you said it should be done for homework, which is interesting because the way I looked at it was slightly different. I actually thought it should be done in class, and I'll explain why. First of all, What is the text? Well, we're focusing on 2 paragraphs only. 2 paragraphs only from a longer text. Therefore, it's a short amount. There isn't too much that has to be done in class. They don't have to spend ages reading it. Also, secondly, the task itself is identifying examples of reference words and examples of substitution. So we're looking at a very specific reading skill linked in this case to the Cambridge first exam. Therefore, I think it needs additional support from the teacher. Now, that's not to say the students couldn't read the whole text before class. In fact, I would tell them to read the whole text beforehand and to answer specific comprehension questions. But as a reading skill lesson, in this case, identifying reference words and examples of substitution, for sure, this needs to be done in class. They need that support from the teachers. Okay, let's do one more example. So scenario number 3 is this one. Look at the scenario and decide, should the reading be done at home or in class? I'm trying to make the scenario, the poll as small as possible. Okay, so if you can't see the scenario, please just type your ideas in the chat box. That's fine. In class. Okay, thank you, Emily. You kind of moved it again. Okay. This one's pretty even. Looking at it, it's kind of 47% in class, 52% for homework out of class. Interesting. Okay. I'm gonna put you out of your misery. It's literally almost neck and neck. 48.7, 51.2, 302 versus 317, 18. Wow. This is a tight vote. It's almost equal now. 50%. Right, I'm going to stop it right now. It is literally 50-50. Wow. Okay, so let's share what my viewpoint on it is, because clearly we are very divided here. So, first of all, we are looking at the learners themselves. So the B1 adult learners. Therefore, they're a reasonable level, and they are adult, therefore they have more autonomy, theoretically, and more motivation. Now, the text is 2 different reviews of a film. So the reviews, as you can see from the page, are actually relatively long, right? But what's really important to note is the actual task. It's a jigsaw reading. So each student reads one review, identifying key strengths, weaknesses before sharing the information. Now, the actual key task, therefore, is actually the communicative task, the summarizing task, which is still a reading skill. And for that reason, for me, I would say that this type of lesson is best done out of class, so for homework. So the students are reading the text, which are arguably quite long or potentially quite long, and the students need to read in quite a lot of detail to get the information that they need, to take the notes that they need. Therefore, it allows them the amount of preparation time that they need to successfully complete the task. In this case, summarizing a review to their partner, identifying the author's opinion. So there's actually a lot going on there. So that's my viewpoint. You don't have to agree with me, but that's how I would propose it to be. Okay, that one for sure. The reading activity should be done out of class. In class is the follow-up work, the summarizing and any other additional work you want to do. But it's interesting, isn't it? It's not always easily identifiable what I need to do in class, what can be done at home. But I think just keep those scenarios sort of forefront in your mind. What is the aim of the class? What is the purpose of this reading lesson? what can be done in class, what cannot be done out of class, and then go from there. And we'll do an example of this in a bit more detail right now. So like I said, focus on the purpose of the lesson. And certainly the purpose of a reading lesson should never be just comprehension. It needs to be more than that. It needs to be more purposeful, more tangible. For me, general comprehension questions can be more often than not done at home. We can then use the text in class to focus on very specific reading skills. That might be skimming, scanning, reading between the lines, determining fact from opinion, evaluating, summarizing, etc. But think about your purpose. So here is Simonet has kind of hit the nail on the head there, critical thinking. Critical thinking can be done at home, but it's much better done in class. So here is the example I have chosen. It's a text taken from, or a reading lesson taken from Life Intermediate Second Edition. And it's all about a caffeine-fueled world. So just looking at it straight away, the text itself is pretty long, right? And your first thoughts are, whoa, I can't do this at home. I can't do this in class. It would take too long. And actually, the students are better off doing it at home. And you're absolutely right. Certain parts of it are better done at home. Of course it is. And if we actually look at the activities associated with it, the first three activities, well, 2, 3, and 4, they're all general comprehension questions. Okay, so we are doing a GIS read. We're doing, in exercise 3 and 4, we're doing a more specific, detailed read of the text. And that is stuff that students can do at home quite easily. They don't need the teacher support for that. Okay? Okay, Natalia, I will answer that question towards the end, okay? I'm trying to keep a check on the chat, so I apologize if I can't keep up all the time. So these kind of questions can be done at home. But what can't necessarily be done at home are the other types of activity within this lesson specifically. So in this one, comprehension questions, get them to do it at home. I can then start my lesson in the same way that I would have done any lesson, right? So we're going to assume that they've done their homework, they've done the comprehension questions, and we're going to focus on a specific reading skill that cannot be done outside of class. So, how would I start the lesson? Well, I would start the lesson in the same way I would do any reading lesson, activating, or in this case, reactivating schemata. I might put students into pairs in a breakout room and just to discuss their thoughts, their opinions about the text. What can they remember about it? Okay? So it's reacting, it's reflecting on what they've read, which is an important part of the reading process. But I might also do something a bit more fun. I might do some kind of quiz about, in this case, caffeine. You can find a quiz about any topic on the internet. Okay? Now, it might be you choose to do one that you found online that sends students to do the quiz. It might be that you create your own quiz using the poll features in the platforms that you're using. This was taken from Zoom. Or, if you want to be really adventurous, you can do a Kahoot quiz on caffeine. But what it does, it just gets students engaged from the off. This is the key thing, engage the learners. Yes, they've done the reading previously, but you want to grab them again, get them focused. And who doesn't love a quiz? Okay, so you've done that. But what I want to focus on now is what actual reading activities I'm going to do in class. And in this case, this particular lesson, it is very much focusing on critical thinking. Okay, and reflection. So the first activity here is working in pairs. But you can't do that at home on your own. You do it in class. Do you think anything the writer says is true about you and your lifestyle? What not, for example? So again, breakout rooms, have a chat about it. But specifically, in this lesson, the purpose is critical thinking and identifying the writer's purpose. What is the author trying to do? Are they trying to entertain us, inform us, or to persuade us? So that is a discussion activity for students to do in groups, in pairs, or as a whole class activity in your video conferencing program. But again, that's not necessarily reading, but what is reading is exercise 7. Look at the list of features which are typical of informative text. Find examples in the article. So they have to reread the text. They're not reading in detail because they've already done that. They already have an understanding of it. What they're doing right here is scanning. So it's a specific scanning skill that we're developing in class. And we might put a time limit on this for our learners. Someone just asked what a breakout room is. So a breakout room is a side room which is available in Zoom and other online video conferencing platforms where students can work in groups or pairs. But the point is, we're not spending the whole lesson reading the text in detail. They are finding specific examples of how an author is presenting an informative text. Okay? And then there's more follow-up for critical thinking. Working pairs discuss the questions. Do you think the writer is successful in his purpose? Did you change your ideas about caffeine? In what way has the article influenced you about caffeine? So again, it's that reflection. It's that synthesizing of information, which is part of the natural process of a reading lesson. You predict, you read, you comprehend, you analyze, you understand it. And you might say, well, that's just a discussion lesson. Some of it is, yes, but it's reacting to the reading text. But there is still specific reading skills being focused on. The scanning and identifying purpose. Okay? Okay. But also, within any kind of reading lesson, you're going to get some kind of vocabulary activity as well. This one is no different. We have a word focus on, depending on your lesson length, you could set this as post-reading homework, but otherwise, I think it can be easily conducted in an online environment because it's quite collaborative. So, for example, exercise 10, you can put students together in pairs in breakout rooms to come up with a suitable way to end the sentences, create their own dialogues using the language that is available within it, right? So again, you would use breakout rooms for this activity, but only if you've got time for it, okay? I mean, it's looking at saying, what can I leave out? What can I definitely have to do in the class? And then, as with any reading lesson within the National Geographic Learning coursebook family, there's always going to be some kind of follow-up speaking task. So this one's all about slogans, and there's a little kind of mini project type task. But all of this is linked to the previous reading. So essentially what we're saying here is that the reading provides a springboard for the classroom, the follow-up work, reacting to text, looking at specific skills. Yes, this text is too long to read in class, but it doesn't mean we cannot exploit it, use it for other things. Okay? Okay, let's have a look at a couple of quick other tasks which you can do. Now, these tasks I've done using Zoom, but I think it's possible to do using other tasks as well. So the first task I want to share with you very quickly is a scanning treasure hunt. And it's a quick, fun activity to get students scanning effectively. Okay? And it's really, really simple. Hopefully this is big enough for you to read. If it isn't, I apologize. So what I would like you to do is to scan the text for the word sunset. And when you find the word sunset, I want you to type in the chat box the word that immediately comes before it? Well, Ed Ram, very good. Following. Excellent. Anyone who said following, good job. It is right there with the little star. Sunset, following. Okay, good scanning. Okay, we're going to do another example. I want you to find the word that is directly before chocolate. What word is directly before chocolate? Wow, who's quick to say? I think Mary Scholl, and is the correct answer. And again, I have a little sort of star button there as well. So that's a really quick, simple activity you can do to practice scanning. Similar to what you would do in the real world classroom, right? So there are definite similarities. Another activity that you can do post-reading is a collocation hunt. So using Zoom, students have access to the different tools at the top. And for this one, I would get them to use the line tools, and I'd give each student or each pair of students a paragraph to reread, and I'll get them to underline any collocations that they find. And at the end of the activity, it might look something like this. So it's called a collocation hunt. It works well with Zoom because students have got access to the annotation tools. It is collaborative. And collocation hunts just highlights their awareness of the use of collocations, word partnerships within any written document, and therefore can help with reading speed. So again, it's just upping that interactivity for the learners. Okay, let's have a look at another example very quickly. Let's get that side. So imagine we are going to do this as our reading lesson. And clearly, it is far, far too long to do in class. It's way too long. So, of course, in the first instance, we are going to get students to do this at home. And actually, I'm going to get them to do all of the comprehension questions as well. But that doesn't mean that I can't use it in class again. You know, they've done all the comprehensions at home, they come to class, and they discuss, they react to what they have read. So you put them into groups, get them to discuss these questions together in the breakout rooms. What surprised you? Did anything shock you? What was the most interesting thing you learned? What was your overall impression? And that is a natural part of the reading process. But that's, again, you might say that's a discussion lesson. That's true, but it's what else we can do. And it's like the first lesson. We're focusing on specific reading skills. Okay? So in this particular lesson, that reading skill is a bit of critical thinking, but more specifically, it's developing, illustrating, or identifying predictions within a text. Or it might be something like developing, understanding, referencing, and cohesion, like we saw earlier. But it might be guessing meaning from context, identifying purpose, identifying fact and opinion and speculation. They are specific reading skills. Do you need to read the whole text again in detail? No. Do they need to scan the text again in class? Yes. But it's a more effective use of your time. They already have familiarity. Therefore, it's possible to do these kind of tasks in class. But also, it needs teacher support. To develop these specific reading skills, you need teacher input, teacher to facilitate the reading activities. Okay, let's do one more example. This one is taken from Close-Up B1. Now, anyone familiar with the Close-Up series, there is a focus on exam skills. And I'm going to have a look at this. And let's say, for whatever reason, we have to do the reading in class. Maybe because we're teaching teenagers and we don't trust them to do it at home. Or maybe we're covering exam-type readings, or maybe both. So this is our lesson, and we need to decide how we're going to cover it. Or rather, what are we going to leave out? So again, hopefully it's big enough for you to be able to read it. And I want you to answer this question. Look at it. Which activities from A to F could you leave out? And maybe how would you adapt it? So have a quick look at it. What activities could you leave out in this lesson? Okay, Kristen straight away says drop F. Yeah, I agree with that completely. Deanna says D, lots of F's, a few E's, an A, C's, F's. Okay, good. I agree. Lots of F's. D, E, and F says Mahinda. C's, A's. Okay. I'm going to give you my answer to this question. So first of all, I think that A and B are good to do in class because it gets students talking. And remember, we want students to be able to communicate in their classes. It's the only chance they get to speak English. But also prepares them for the task. C is important, it's fine to do because it's a gist read. And because it's a gist read, they're reading quickly. You can set a time limit, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, whatever it might be. So it's a short period of time. They're not analyzing in huge depth. So it's fine. Okay, exercise D. This is fine to do, again, because it's focusing on an exam reading skill. And you can put students into pairs or groups in breakout rooms and get them to read and discuss each paragraph one at a time, giving each title a subheading. So therefore it's communicative. So D is quite a communicative task. They're not reading the whole text in detail. They are working together. Now, it's exercise E which I'm most interested in. Because if they're to do all of the questions and to read the whole text again in detail, that will take a lot of time. So, what I would suggest is that actually they can probably maybe do the first 2 or 3 questions in class only, and then get them to do the rest of them at home. But also, I would probably get them to do it working together, do it as a communicative activity. So I think it's a case of just being a little bit wary of how much you can get in. You don't have to do the whole activity. They can do some at home as well. Okay, someone's mentioned about the word focus. This for sure I would give to them before class. I would ask them, or I'd send them an email, or however I communicate with my students, to learn this vocabulary before the lesson. I don't have time in my lesson to spend lots of time pre-teaching. That is something that is very doable as homework pre-class, i.e. the flipped classroom. Okay? And then, yeah, like you said, F. F can be done at home. That's or not at all. That can be completely dropped. But what I would definitely do in class, I'll try and do this ideas focus as well. Because this is reacting to the text, and it's communicative, it's speaking. Remember, we want students to speak in class as much as possible. So I think if we carefully manage what we have within a reading lesson, it's very possible to do enough in class as long as we split some of it out. Okay, let's move on. Okay, but we don't have to just use the course book in class. We can also do online reading activities using the internet. They're already connected to the internet, so why not use it? It's there to be used. This is one of the kind of silver linings of the situation. We can access much more content as well. But reading online does differ to offline reading or to reading a text within a course book. I've asked this as a question, but it's a rhetorical question, okay? So don't type in the chat box. But research suggests that online reading requires a different set of skills and strategies than offline reading. And these different skills and strategies are required because online reading is frequently information seeking, guided by the reader rather than the teacher. It's also non-linear as we navigate through multiple windows rather than reading something from beginning to end. And the skills required for successful online reading are the ability to formulate appropriate questions, locate reliable information, evaluate, synthesize, communicate that information. But also online, there are so many different types of text to read. And they're always accompanied by a range of multimedia, video, image, sound. Okay, so let's just do an example of this. One really simple activity is to do a reading race. Okay, and this is exactly what it seems to be, but it's an online reading race. So the answer is not in a text in the course book. Students have to go online and find the answer. So imagine we're doing this lesson all about Bill Gates and one of his TED Talks. And we just want to do a little fun activity, a quick warmer to get people more aware of who Bill Gates is, right? So we ask them a question. What and when was the first TED Talk that Bill Gates gave? And I would tell my students, I want you to go to another window on the internet using your preferred browser and search that answer as quickly as you can. So I want you to do this for me right now. So we're going to do this. So open up another browser window and find the answer to that question as quick as you can. What and when was the first TED Talk that Bill Gates gave? How quick can you find the answer? So I want the name and the year. Okay, what are you saying? 2010? But what year? Okay, that's the name of that talk. That wasn't the first one he did. I want to say that's not the first one he did. Okay, someone's saying no, I did. Jacqueline, go online, find the answer. Ali says it's Ebola one, not that one. There's one before that. Okay, I'm going to share the answer. Actually, his first TED Talk was Mosquitoes, Malaria and Education in 2009. Some of you found that. Well done. Good job. Okay, what you probably noticed was that it wasn't the first answer that came up on Google. You had to actually go into the web page and find, i.e., read and find the answer. It's such a simple activity, but it's reading. And you can do that with any topic as a quick warm-up. Ask 2 or 3 questions, find the answers online. It does force the students to dig deep, Christine M. You're absolutely right. And it just makes the topic become more real. It's not just in the course book, it's in the real world. And that's the great thing about using National Geographic learning products and authentic content. Okay. You can also do this with longer web pages as well, okay? So another example of a reading race is we're doing this in our course book. This is from Life Pre-Intermediate. And we want to do more about long life. So you find a website that's got a similar kind of article in it. So I found this website from The Independent, The Secrets to Long Life. Now, of course, you have to be careful about what online material you use. You need to make sure that it's appropriate for your learners. You need to make sure that it's the appropriate level. Will they be able to comprehend it? You want to make sure it's not too long. If it's too long, they're going to become disinterested. You've got to think about their age. Maybe you've got to think about the culture. Is it culturally relevant or culturally appropriate for your learners? And one way you can check a couple of those things is to use the English profile document or Word document checker. So this is a really nice website where you can go in and you can copy and paste a text into it to make sure that it's the appropriate level. So you paste in your text. It can only be a maximum of 500 words. Okay, 500 maximum. And then what happens, it analyzes every single word in the text and it'll tell you the level, the CEFR level of each word. So we can see here that the vast majority of the text is A1. There's some A2, some B1, some B2, and some unlisted as well. So we can clearly see that this reading would be appropriate for most levels of students. Certainly sort of B1 and above, or sort of even A2, it would be appropriate for. But it just makes using online text more safer for you, essentially. But what you can then do is go back to the text, and you can do the same kind of reading race as an online reading race, rather than just using the material in your books. Okay? So that's just a couple of ideas of how you can incorporate online reading as well. What I want to spend the last 10 minutes talking about is asynchronous reading. Because reading doesn't just happen in the classroom, it happens in the real world. And if you want your students to be better readers, they have to read outside of class time as well. Absolutely have to do it. So they need to be reading as much as possible to be better readers. But we cannot just expect students to read by themselves or for themselves. They need to be poked. They need to be prompted to do so. But I think when you're in the online environment, this is much easier to do than when you're in the school environment. Because the online environment is extremely rich with reading content. Magazines, newspapers, comics, graphic novels, blogs, memes, interactive fiction, social media. The list goes on and on and on. Better still, they often include video, images, audio. So they are more appropriate, they're more engaging, more motivating for learners to read. So the question is then, how can we encourage and facilitate online reading outside of class time? Here's some ideas. So first of all, imagine that we are doing this unit of the book. This is from Life Pre-Intermediate, and it's all about the environment. So I know that I'm going to teach this next week. What would I do? Well, I'd very simply send my students links to articles connected with this theme. Perhaps a news item on climate change, an article on attempts to counter deforestation, etc. Whatever it might be. But for sure, I can find some articles on the topic that I'm going to teach. Because let's face it, the number one reason why students don't like to talk, well, maybe not the number one, but one of the main reasons students don't like to talk in class, whether it's an online class or the real world class, is because they say, I don't know, I have nothing to say. Now, if you can provide students with links online to read before the class, just for their own information, then that's going to help them going forwards. So these links can be sent via email, using an online environment like a class blog, Moodle, or even Facebook page. It can be used for a basis for classroom discussion, for example. You can also send students links to text just to read for themselves, for fun, as a follow-up. So you can do it for pre-class reading, post-class reading, just to develop students' knowledge and understanding. And it will help them going forwards. So that's one really simple way of facilitating additional reading. And I think an important thing to note is we can actually give them multiple links and say, just have a look, choose one or two. Students like to have choice, remember. If you give them choice, they're more likely to read something. So if you give them 5 websites, if they read one, that's a result. Okay. But of course, readings come in all different shapes and sizes. And something that students like doing is, of course, social media. So here's a really nice task that I'm borrowing from Nikki Hockley, who wrote about this in English Teaching Professional. And I'd call it a Twitter task, but it could be any social media. So this is how it works. Very simple. You ask